At 11:47 p.m. Caleb Mercer looked at the empty chair across the dining table and told himself not to worry. Elise had said she would be home before midnight. She had kissed him near the apartment elevator, adjusted the collar of her black coat, and smiled with the easy confidence of someone who had never considered that a promise could become evidence against her. "One drink," she had said. "Maybe two. The team is celebrating the new campaign." Caleb had smiled. "Text me when you're leaving." She had rolled her eyes affectionately. "You worry too much." Now the apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the windows. Caleb picked up his phone. No message. He called. The line rang until voicemail. "Hey, it's me," he said after the tone, keeping his voice casual. "Just checking in. Call me when you get this." He ended the call and placed the phone face down. 5 minutes later, he turned it over again. Nothing. At 12:18. He called a second time. No answer. At 12:31, he opened Instagram without thinking. Elise had posted a photograph earlier that evening. Champagne glasses, blurred city lights, her colleagues smiling beneath a rooftop heater. The caption read, "Big night with the best people." Caleb stared at the picture longer than he should have. "You said one drink," he whispered. The words sounded ridiculous in an empty room. He called again. Still nothing. At 12:56. Caleb stood beside the window overlooking the Chicago River. "Elise?" he said when the call went to voicemail. "I'm not angry. I just need to know you're okay." He paused. "Please call me." The rain thickened. Across the river, office towers burned with scattered rectangles of light. Caleb knew that city well. He knew how quickly midnight became one in Chicago, how a drink became another, how a conversation became an excuse to stay. He also knew his wife. Or at least he thought he did. At 1:32, he called again. This time he did not leave a message. At 1:48, a notification appeared on his phone. Not from Elise. It was an automated alert from the location-sharing service they had once used for travel. Caleb had forgotten it was still connected to her account. His eyes narrowed. The last recorded location was not the rooftop bar where Elise had said the celebration was being held. It was a boutique hotel 7 miles away. Caleb stared at the screen. "No," he said quietly. He checked the time stamp. 1:41 a.m. His first instinct was to call her again, his second was to believe there had to be an innocent explanation. His third, after months of memories suddenly rearranging themselves, was silence. He sat down. There had been the cancelled dinner in May. The business trip in June. The password change in July. The way Elise had started taking her phone into the bathroom. The way she smiled at messages she refused to explain. None of those things had been proof. Together, they became something else. At 2:07, his phone rang. Caleb's heart jumped. He answered immediately. "Elise?" It was her voice, but faint and hurried. "Caleb, where are you?" A pause. "Too long. I'm with some people from work." "At the party?" "Yes." Caleb looked at the location on his screen. "The party is at the Fairmont." Another pause. "I know. You're at the Lakeshore Hotel." Silence. "How do you know that?" Elise asked. Caleb almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in the question. "You tell me." "Caleb, listen." "No. You listen." His voice remained calm. That frightened him more than anger would have. "I've called you 4 times. My phone was in my bag. For 4 hours. It was loud. I couldn't hear it." "You couldn't hear it at a hotel 7 miles away?" Elise exhaled sharply. "You're making this into something it isn't." Caleb closed his eyes. "Then tell me what it is. I don't have to explain every minute of my night to you." The sentence landed harder than any confession could have. Caleb looked at the wedding photograph on the bookshelf. They were younger in it. Elise was laughing. He was looking at her instead of the camera. "You're right," he said. "You don't. Caleb, come home." "I'm coming." "Elise." "What? Don't lie to me again." The line went quiet. Then she said, "I'll be home." The call ended. Caleb remained sitting in the darkness. He did not call again. He did not send another message. He opened his laptop instead. At 2:24 a.m. he searched for a divorce attorney. At 2:41, he found the name of a lawyer his firm had worked with on an unrelated matter. At 2:53, he drafted an email. He stared at the final sentence for nearly a minute before pressing send. "I need to discuss filing for divorce as soon as possible." Outside, the rain continued falling over the city. Inside, Caleb finally understood something that frightened him more than whatever Elise was doing at that hotel. The night was not the beginning of the end. It was simply the first night he had stopped pretending the end had not already begun. At 4:17 a.m., Caleb was still awake when the elevator doors opened at the end of the hallway. He heard the soft mechanical chime through the apartment door, followed by footsteps approaching slowly across the marble corridor. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then the lock turned. Elise stepped inside. She looked nothing like the woman in the photograph she had posted earlier that evening. Her hair, once carefully pinned, had fallen loose around her shoulders. Her makeup was faded beneath her eyes. She carried her black heels in one hand and her purse in the other. The first thing she noticed was the kitchen light. The second was Caleb sitting at the table. She stopped. "You're still awake." Caleb looked at the clock. "It's 4:17. Elise swallowed. "I know. You said you'd be home before midnight." The night got complicated. It usually does when someone doesn't want to explain it. She placed her shoes beside the door. "I'm tired, Caleb." "So am I." She looked at him carefully. "Are you going to interrogate me?" "No." "Good." Caleb folded his hands on the table. "I'm going to listen." Something in his tone made her hesitate. "There was a problem with the campaign team," she said. "We had an argument about the launch. Daniel was upset, and a few of us went somewhere quieter to talk." Caleb watched her face. "Daniel? Daniel Foster? Your vice president?" "Yes." "At the hotel?" Her eyes flickered. "We needed somewhere private." Caleb nodded slowly. "Private enough that you couldn't hear your phone?" "I told you. It was in my purse. For 4 hours." "Caleb, please." "What? I don't want to do this at 4 in the morning." He leaned back. "Neither did I." She looked toward the hallway. "Can we talk tomorrow?" "We are talking now." Elise sighed. "Nothing happened." Caleb said nothing. "I mean it," she continued. "Daniel and I were discussing work. That's all. I didn't ask whether something happened." Her expression tightened. "You were obviously implying it." "I was asking where you were." "I told you." "No. You gave me a version." Her eyes hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Caleb reached for his phone and placed it on the table. The location screen was still open. "This." Elise stared at it. For the first time since walking through the door, she looked genuinely frightened. "That's not accurate. The system has been accurate for 3 years. It glitches." "Not for 4 hours." "Caleb, I was there." "At the hotel? Then why did you tell me you were at the Fairmont?" Elise looked away. "Because I knew you would react like this." "Like what?" "Like a man who thinks his wife belongs to him." The words hummed between them. Caleb stared at her. He had expected anger, denial, maybe tears. He had not expected that. "I don't think you belong to me," he said. "I thought we belonged to each other." Elise's face changed for half a second. Something almost like regret appeared. Then it disappeared. "It's not that simple." "No," Caleb said quietly. "It isn't." He picked up his phone again. "When did you leave the Fairmont?" "Around midnight." "Who drove you to the hotel?" "I took a car." "Which one?" I don't remember. You don't remember? It was late. Caleb nodded. And Daniel? She crossed her arms. Why are you obsessed with Daniel? Because you mentioned him. I mentioned him because he was involved in the meeting. Was he at the hotel? Silence. Caleb did not move. Elise looked at the floor. For part of it. There it was. Not the truth. But a crack in the lie. Caleb had learned something during years of negotiating corporate disputes. People rarely reveal deception by what they say. They reveal it by what they suddenly need to explain. How long? He asked. I don't know. An hour? Maybe. 2. I said I don't know. Did he leave before you? Elise closed her eyes. Caleb, stop. Did he? Yes. When? I don't remember. Caleb stood. Then we're done for tonight. Elise stared at him. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to stand here and force you to tell me something you already decided I don't deserve to know. She stepped closer. You're making a huge mistake. Maybe. You don't even know what happened. You're right. Then why are you acting like you do? Caleb looked at her. Because I know what didn't happen. What? You didn't come home. Elise's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. I needed space. You could have said that. You wouldn't have understood. You didn't give me the chance. She looked toward the window. The first hint of dawn was beginning to appear behind the buildings. I didn't want to fight. Caleb almost smiled. So you disappeared. I didn't disappear. I called you 4 times. I know. And you saw the calls? Elise hesitated. Yes. Caleb felt something inside him become very still. You saw them? Yes. And you chose not to answer. I didn't know what to say. He nodded once. That's different. Caleb, no. It matters. He walked toward the bedroom. Elise followed him. Where are you going? To sleep. You're seriously going to sleep after this? I'm not sure I'll sleep. Then talk to me. Caleb stopped at the bedroom door. About what? About us. He turned. Which version of us? Elise stared at him. What does that mean? The version where you love me. His voice remained quiet. Or the version where you need me to keep believing things you don't believe anymore. Elise's lips parted, but no answer came. Caleb entered the bedroom and closed the door. He did not slam it. That somehow hurt her more. At 5:06 a.m., Elise sat alone in the kitchen and opened her phone. There were 11 messages from Daniel. The last one had arrived at 3:58. You made it home. She stared at it. Then another appeared. We need to talk before you tell him anything. Elise locked the screen. For the first time that night, the fear was no longer about Caleb discovering where she had been. It was about what would happen if Caleb discovered why she had been there. In the bedroom, Caleb was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. He had not slept. At 5:21, he opened his laptop again. The divorce attorney had replied. I can meet you at 8:30 this morning. Caleb read the message twice. Then he typed a simple response. I'll be there. He closed the laptop. Beside him, the empty half of the bed remained perfectly untouched. For years, Elise had believed Caleb's patience was proof that he could never leave. That morning, she began to understand the difference between patience and permission. One could last for years. The other could disappear before sunrise. At 7:03 a.m., Elise found Caleb standing in the kitchen wearing the same shirt he had worn the night before. He had made coffee for 2 out of habit, but only 1 cup had been touched. His laptop was closed beside it. His wedding ring remained on his finger. You're leaving, Elise said. Caleb looked at his watch. I have an appointment. With who? A lawyer. She stared at him. For what? You know. No, I don't. Then you haven't been listening. Elise crossed her arms. You're filing for divorce because I didn't answer my phone for a few hours. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. That's what you think this is about? What else am I supposed to think? That's the problem. She pulled out a chair. Sit down. Caleb remained standing. Elise, sit down, Caleb. He finally did. She sat across from him. The morning light came through the windows, pale and cold, exposing every detail of the room, the untouched flowers on the counter, the 2 wineglasses from the night before, the framed photograph of their wedding near the bookshelf. Elise pointed toward him. You're overreacting. Caleb's expression barely changed. Maybe. You are. You took one bad night and turned it into the end of our marriage. No, what are you doing? Accepting that the marriage has been ending for a long time. Elise stared at him. That's dramatic. Is it? Yes. Caleb leaned back. When was the last time you asked me how my day was? She blinked. What? Not because you needed something. Not because there was a dinner or event. When was the last time you actually asked? I don't know. Exactly. That's ridiculous. Is it? People get busy. We got busy. That's life. No, Caleb said. That's the explanation we used because the truth was harder. Elise looked away. What truth? That you stopped coming home to me even when you were physically here. Her jaw tightened. I work. I know. I have responsibilities. I know. I built my career from nothing. I know that too. Then stop acting like I'm some selfish woman who abandoned her husband. Caleb looked at her carefully. I never called you selfish. You don't have to. Elise. What? Do you love me? The question silenced her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Caleb watched her struggle. It was the first honest answer he had received all morning. Of course I love you, she finally said. Then why does being married to me seem to make you unhappy? Because marriage isn't supposed to be my entire life. I never asked it to be. You expect me to choose you every time. I expected you to choose us sometimes. Elise stood abruptly. This is exactly what I mean. You turn everything into some emotional test. Caleb remained seated. Because you keep failing it, she froze. The words were sharper than anything he had said before. Excuse me. You wanted honesty. No, I wanted you to stop punishing me for having a life. And I wanted a wife who still wanted a life with me. She shook her head. You have no idea what it's like in my world. Then tell me. You wouldn't understand. Try. Elise paced toward the window. Everyone around me is moving. They're getting promoted, buying houses, building companies, traveling, meeting people who matter. And every time I walk into one of those rooms, I feel like I'm supposed to prove that I belong there. Caleb watched her. And where do I belong? That's not fair. You belong here. She gestured toward the apartment. This is your world. Caleb looked around the room. And yours? She didn't answer. That silence hurt more than the night before. Caleb remembered a dinner 3 months earlier. Elise had been late. She arrived after 9, still wearing her conference badge, and found him sitting at the table with candles that had already burned halfway down. You didn't have to wait, she had said. He had smiled. I wanted to. She had looked at the food and said, you know, sometimes I feel like you want me to be the woman I was 5 years ago. At the time, Caleb had thought she was tired. Now he wondered whether that had been the first time she had tried to tell him the truth. Was it Daniel? He asked. Elise turned. What? Did this start with Daniel? No. The answer came too quickly. Caleb noticed. You're lying. I'm not. You didn't even think. Because the answer is no, then why do you keep defending him? Because he's my colleague. Colleagues don't send messages at 4 in the morning saying they need to talk before you tell your husband anything. Her face went pale. You saw that. Your phone was on the counter. You went through my phone. No. He paused. You left it open. Elise reached for it immediately. You had no right. Maybe not. That's private. So was our marriage. She stared at him. You think I'm sleeping with him? Caleb said nothing. Do you? I think you're emotionally somewhere you haven't admitted to yourself. Her eyes filled with tears. Nothing happened. That's not what I asked. I care about him. The room became completely still. Elise covered her mouth as if she wished she could pull the words back. Caleb looked down at his wedding ring. Thank you. For what? For finally telling me something true. Caleb, it's not what you think. Then what is it? He understands me. Caleb nodded slowly. I see. He understands the pressure I'm under. And I don't. That's different. Caleb looked up. Elise struggled for an answer. With you, I feel like I'm always being measured against who I used to be. With him? I feel like who I could become. Caleb absorbed that quietly. That's not love, he said. Maybe it isn't. Her voice broke. But it feels real. Caleb stood. That's enough. Enough for what? For me to stop protecting you from the consequences of your choices. Elise stepped toward him. Please don't do this. Do what? Leave. Caleb's eyes softened for the first time. I didn't leave last night. She stared at him. I was still here. He touched the edge of the kitchen table. I have been here for months. Maybe years. The difference is that last night, you finally made it impossible for me to pretend you were here too. Elise began to cry. I never wanted to hurt you. I believe you. Then stay. That's the problem. He looked at her through the morning light. You didn't have to want to hurt me, you only had to stop caring whether you did. She wiped her cheek. What happens now? Caleb picked up his coat. Now I meet the lawyer. And after that? I don't know. Do you still love me? He paused at the door. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered. That's why this took so long. Elise closed her eyes. Caleb opened the door. Caleb. He stopped. If I end this, she whispered, there's no going back. He looked over his shoulder. I know. You're really willing to lose everything. No, he said. I'm unwilling to keep losing myself. Then he walked into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him. Elise stood alone in the apartment they had once chosen together. For the first time, she understood that the marriage she had considered safe had never been safe because Caleb could never leave. It had been safe because Caleb had always chosen to stay. And now, for the first time, that choice was no longer his. By 8:26 a.m., Chicago had turned the color of wet steel. Commuters streamed along the sidewalks beneath umbrellas, trains rattled over the elevated tracks, and thousands of people moved through the city carrying coffee, laptops, grievances, ambitions, and private disasters that nobody around them could see. Caleb sat in the reception area of a law firm on LaSalle Street, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He had expected to feel panic. Instead, he felt something stranger. Relief. The receptionist looked up from her computer. Mr. Mercer? Yes. Miss Bennett can see you now. Caleb stood. Thank you. Claire Bennett was in her late 50s, with silver hair cut precisely at her jaw and the quiet manner of someone who had watched people destroy themselves with words for decades. She shook his hand and motioned toward a chair. Your email said you wanted to discuss divorce proceedings. I do. Are you certain? Caleb looked through the glass wall at the city below. I was certain at 2:53 this morning. Claire studied him. That is not usually when people make their best decisions. I didn't make the decision at 2:53. He turned back toward her. I recognized it. She leaned back. Tell me what happened. Caleb explained the night without exaggeration. He told her about Elise's promise, the unanswered calls, the location alert, the hotel, and the contradictions. He did not tell her every suspicion. He did not need to. Claire listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked, "Do you have evidence of infidelity?" "I have evidence that she lied about where she was." "Those are different things." "I know. And you understand that filing for divorce doesn't automatically mean the marriage ends tomorrow?" "Yes. There will be financial disclosures, negotiations, possibly mediation or litigation. If there are substantial assets, property, retirement accounts, business interests, I'm aware." Claire folded her hands. "Then what do you want?" Caleb hesitated. "I want to stop living in a marriage where I have to convince myself that my wife still chooses me." Claire's expression softened. "That's not a legal answer." "It's the only answer I have." She nodded slowly. "Then we'll start carefully." While Caleb signed the first documents, Elise was still standing in their apartment, staring at the closed bedroom door. She had not slept. She had showered twice, changed clothes, then changed again. At 8:52, she finally called Caleb. He answered on the third ring. "Where are you?" she asked. "Downtown." "At the office?" "No." She knew immediately. "You're with the lawyer?" "Yes." Elise gripped the kitchen counter. "You actually did it. I told you I would." "I thought you were angry." "I was. Then why didn't you say something?" Caleb looked down at the folder on the desk. "Because I didn't want to threaten you with something I wasn't prepared to do." "Caleb, please." "What? Come home." "Why?" "Because we need to talk." "We did. Not enough." Caleb was silent. "I was wrong," she said. "About what?" "About everything." His voice remained gentle. "That's a big sentence." "I mean it." "Do you?" "Yes." She began crying. "I don't want to lose you." Caleb closed his eyes. That sentence had once been the one thing he wanted to hear. Now it sounded late. "Elise," he said quietly, "you didn't lose me last night, then don't leave. You lost the version of me who believed waiting was the same thing as loving." She sat down. "I can fix this." She had no answer. That silence told him more than tears could. "I'll come home," he said. Her heart lifted. "You will? For our things. And to talk." "Caleb, I'll see you soon." He ended the call. At 9:41, he returned to the apartment. Elise was waiting near the window. She looked exhausted. "I called Daniel," she said. Caleb took off his coat. "Why?" "To end it." He looked at her. "End what?" "Whatever this was." "And what did he say?" "He said I was confused." Caleb nodded. "Were you?" "I don't know anymore." "That's honest." She stepped closer. "I don't want him." Caleb's eyes lowered. "You don't have to convince me." "I'm trying to convince you." "That's different." "Then what do I do?" Caleb looked around the apartment. Their life was everywhere. Books they had chosen together. Framed photographs. The brass lamp Elise had bought at a flea market because she said it made the room feel warm. A wedding invitation from 10 years earlier sat beneath a stack of unopened mail. "Do you remember our first apartment?" he asked. "In Lincoln Park?" "Yes." She smiled faintly. "The radiator was broken. You slept in 3 sweaters. You bought that ridiculous electric blanket. You loved it. I still have it." Caleb nodded. "We used to talk for hours. We still can." "No," he said. "We can remember talking for hours." She looked wounded. "That's cruel." "Maybe. I was unhappy." "I know. Why didn't you notice?" Caleb stared at her. "I did." "Then why didn't you stop me?" He almost smiled. "Because you're not a child." Elise looked away. "I wanted you to fight for me." "I did. Not like this." "How?" She couldn't answer. Caleb moved toward the hallway. "The lawyer will send you the documents." Elise's face changed. "Already?" "Yes." She walked after him. "Caleb, please." What? Give me a week. For what? To think. You had months. I didn't know what I was doing. Neither did I. Then let's start over. He stopped. You can't start over by pretending the last year didn't happen. I'm not asking you to forget. What are you asking? For one chance. Caleb looked at her. You had one every morning. Elise began crying again. I love you. His face tightened. I know. Then why does that sound like goodbye? Because love isn't always enough to make a marriage safe. She wiped her eyes. Are you going to tell people? About what? About Daniel. No. Why? Because I'm not interested in humiliating you. She stared at him. You could destroy me. I don't want to destroy you. Then, what do you want? Caleb answered after a long pause. I want my life back. The sentence left her without anything to say. He picked up his briefcase. I'll stay at a hotel for a few nights. You're leaving the apartment? For now. You already made arrangements? Yes. When? Before I came home. Elise looked at the hallway, then at the suitcase waiting beside the door. She had not noticed it before. Her eyes widened. You packed? At 5:40. While I was in the kitchen. Yes. You planned all this? Caleb shook his head. I didn't plan the night. I planned what I would do if the truth was what it looked like. She stared at the suitcase. Suddenly, the meaning of his calmness became clear. It had never been an act. He was already moving pieces of his life away from hers. His clothes were packed. His lawyer was working. His finances were being reviewed. His emotional dependence had already begun to disappear. The man she had assumed would spend another month, another year, perhaps another decade waiting for her was standing in their doorway with a suitcase in his hand. Caleb, she whispered. He opened the door. Take care of yourself, Elise. Don't say that. He paused. Why? Because it sounds final. He looked at her for a long moment. That's because it is. The door closed. Elise stood motionless in the apartment. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her attorney appeared. Then another. The first legal documents had arrived. She opened the email with trembling fingers. The words were formal, cold, unmistakably real. For the first time, she understood that Caleb had not filed for divorce to frighten her into honesty. He had filed because he had finally stopped asking permission to leave. 3 days after Caleb left the apartment, Elise stopped pretending that the divorce papers were an empty threat. They sat inside a cream-colored folder on the dining table, untouched except for the corners she had repeatedly straightened with trembling fingers. She had read every page twice. The language was painfully ordinary. Assets. Accounts, property. Separation. Dissolution. There was nothing dramatic about the words, and that was what frightened her most. Her marriage, the thing she had once believed was too intimate to be reduced to paperwork, had become a legal process moving forward without asking how she felt about it. At 7:15 that evening, Caleb arrived to collect more clothes. Elise was waiting. Can we talk? She asked. Caleb placed his keys on the counter. We can talk. Sit down. He did. She remained standing for several seconds before finally taking the chair opposite him. I need to tell you the truth. Caleb looked at her. Then tell me. Elise clasped her hands. It was Daniel. Caleb did not react. I know. No, you know there was something. You don't know what it was. He waited. It started 6 months ago. The words seemed to alter the temperature of the room. We were working on the Madison account, she continued. He started staying late. We talked after everyone left. At first it was about work. And then? Then it became personal. Caleb looked down at the table. How personal? Elise swallowed. He knew things about me. Things I didn't. Things I wasn't saying to you. Caleb's jaw tightened. Why? Because I was angry. At me? At myself? That's not an answer. I felt like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Caleb watched her carefully. And Daniel made you feel recognized? Yes. So you let him? Elise nodded. Yes. Caleb leaned back. Did you sleep with him? Her eyes closed. Yes. The room went quiet. Caleb had imagined hearing the answer many times. None of those imagined versions had prepared him for the strange emptiness that followed. There was no explosion. No broken glass. No shouting. Just a man sitting across from the woman he had married, discovering that the worst possibility had become a fact. How many times, he asked. Does it matter? To me, yes. She hesitated. Enough that it wasn't an accident. Caleb looked at her. That's what I needed to know. Elise began crying. I am sorry. I believe you. Then why won't you forgive me? Forgiveness isn't the same as staying. She wiped her cheeks. I can end it. You already should have. I mean completely. It's over. Because you filed? Because you chose? She stared at him. Caleb's expression hardened slightly. No. What? You chose him when you kept meeting him. I was confused. Confusion doesn't make reservations. She flinched. That's cruel. It's accurate. You think I plan to destroy our marriage? No. Then why are you treating me like I did? Caleb leaned forward. Because you didn't need a plan. You only needed enough moments where you could have stopped and didn't. Elise looked down. I thought I could control it. What? The separation between work and home. Between what I felt and what I did. And me? I thought you'd always be there. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. There it was. The sentence he had been waiting to hear without realizing it. Say that again. Elise looked confused. What? You thought I'd always be there? Yes. Why? Because you always were. Caleb nodded slowly. That's the part you never understood. What? My loyalty was not a guarantee. Elise stared at him. I never meant to take it for granted. But you did. He stood and walked toward the window. You believed I would absorb every disappointment because I loved you. I did love you. I know. I still do. Maybe. He turned. But love that keeps asking someone else to carry the consequences isn't enough. Elise stood too. What about us? There is no us in the way you're asking. You can't just erase 10 years. I'm not erasing them. Then why are you throwing them away? Caleb's voice softened. I'm not throwing them away. I'm refusing to let them become an excuse for another 10 years. She stepped closer. Daniel never meant what you think. I don't care what Daniel meant. He said he would leave his girlfriend. Caleb gave a small, tired smile. Did he? Elise hesitated. Not yet. Of course. It was complicated. No. Caleb shook his head. It was convenient. Elise looked wounded. You don't know him. I know enough. He made me feel alive. And now? She looked away. Now, he says everything has become too complicated. Caleb nodded. There it is. Elise covered her face. I thought he loved me. Maybe he did. Then why doesn't he want me now? Caleb looked at her with something almost resembling pity. Because wanting someone in secret is easy. Building a life with them is different. She lowered her hands. Is that what you think happened? I know. Because you were willing to risk our marriage for a relationship that existed only in the spaces where reality couldn't reach it. Elise sank into the chair. What am I supposed to do? Live with what you chose. That's all. No. Caleb's voice was quiet. You have to learn that consequences aren't punishment. Then what are they? The truth arriving late. She cried silently. Caleb gathered the clothes he had come for. At the door, Elise said, Would you ever take me back? He stopped. She thought he might turn around. He did not. I don't know. Is there still a chance? There is a difference between a chance and a promise. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to make you feel safe by promising something I don't know I can give. Elise stared at him. You used to promise me everything. Caleb looked back at her. And you used to believe me. He opened the door. Good night, Elise. Caleb. He paused. I never thought you'd really leave. He looked at her for several seconds. That's why I had to. Then he walked away. The elevator doors closed between them. Elise remained in the hallway until they disappeared. Inside the apartment, her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel appeared. We need to keep some distance for now. This is getting too serious. Elise stared at the words. 6 months earlier, they would have made her heart race. Tonight, they made her feel hollow. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the wedding photograph on her phone. Caleb was looking at her in the picture exactly the way he had looked at her for years, without suspicion, without calculation, without needing proof that she deserved his attention. She pressed her thumb against the screen. I thought you'd always be there, she whispered. The apartment gave her no answer. And for the first time, Elise understood what Caleb had meant. His loyalty had never been a permanent possession. It had been a choice he made every day. She had simply mistaken his devotion for something she owned. By the end of the month, Elise had learned that losing Caleb was not one dramatic event. It was a series of small absences. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom, his jackets no longer hung behind the bedroom door. The coffee machine still made 2 cups if she pressed the button out of habit, but only one ever disappeared. Even the apartment seemed to have changed its breathing. It was quieter without him, yet somehow every room carried the shape of his absence. Daniel had stopped calling regularly. Their messages became shorter, then practical, then almost non-existent. One Thursday evening, Elise finally asked him to meet her. They sat across from each other in a restaurant near the river, surrounded by couples and business dinners. Daniel looked tired. You said this was important. It is. What do you want? Elise stared at him. I want to know what we're doing. Daniel looked away. Elise. Don't. Her voice was quiet. Don't say my name like you're already leaving. I'm not leaving. Then tell me what happens next. He took a breath. I don't know. You said you understood me. I do. You said we could have something real. I believe that. And now? Daniel rubbed his forehead. Now everything is complicated. Elise almost laughed. My husband filed for divorce because of us. Because of your choices. She stared at him. Our choices. You were married. The sentence stunned her. So now it's my fault. You're saying exactly that. Daniel lowered his voice. I never asked you to leave your husband. Elise looked at him as though he had spoken another language. You told me you loved me. I did. You kissed me in hotel rooms. Yes. You told me you were going to leave your girlfriend. Daniel looked down. I said I was thinking about it. For 6 months. Things aren't that simple. Elise felt something inside her collapse. No, she whispered. They were simple when you wanted me. Daniel reached across the table. Elise. She pulled her hand away. Don't. She stood. I thought you were the person who understood me. Daniel looked at her with tired eyes. Maybe I understood what you needed at the time. She walked away before he could say anything else. Outside, the wind came off the river cold enough to sting her face. She stood beneath the awning and called Caleb. He answered after 2 rings. Hello. His voice was calm. Elise closed her eyes. Hearing it almost broke her. Can I see you? A pause. Why? I need to talk. About what? About us. There is no us to discuss tonight. Please. Caleb was silent. Tomorrow, he finally said. Where? The coffee shop near your office. The next afternoon, Elise arrived 10 minutes early. For several seconds, neither spoke. You look tired, Caleb said. I am. Have you been sleeping? Not much. He nodded. What did you want to say? Elise looked at his hands. I made a mistake. Caleb didn't respond. A terrible one. Still nothing. I thought Daniel was someone I could build a future with. And now? Now I know I was wrong. Caleb took a sip of coffee. Why? She looked at him. Because when things became real, he wasn't there. Caleb's expression remained unreadable. And you were, she asked. Where were you when things became real? Working. That's not what I mean. I know. I thought you would fight for me. I did. No. You filed for divorce. That was the fight. She looked confused. What? Against becoming someone I hated. Elise's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to lose you. You already lost me. Is there really nothing left? Caleb looked out the window. There are memories. That's not what I mean. I know. She reached across the table. He gently moved his hand away. The gesture was small, but it devastated her. You don't even want me to touch you. Not like before. Why? Because before, I trusted what your touch meant. Elise lowered her hand. I can change. Maybe. I can prove it. To me? Yes. Caleb shook his head. That's the problem. What is? You're talking about proving something to me because I'm watching. He leaned forward. The person you were with Daniel wasn't watched by me. That's who I need to understand. Elise stared at him. I was lost. Then find yourself. I want to find myself with you. Caleb's eyes softened, but only briefly. You want the ending to be different. That's not the same as wanting to rebuild the marriage. How do I rebuild it? I don't know. You won't tell me. Because I'm not your guide anymore. The words were painful, but not cruel. I spent years trying to make this marriage work, he continued. I reminded you about birthdays. I planned weekends. I waited when you were late, I answered every call. I kept telling myself that eventually you'd come back emotionally. Elise whispered, I didn't know. You didn't ask. She looked down. What if I do now? Now I'm listening to what you say. He paused. But I'm watching what you choose. She looked at him. What do you mean? If you want me back, don't tell me. Then what should I do? Nothing for me. She frowned. Nothing? Live differently because you believe it is right, not because you're trying to win me back. Elise felt tears sliding down her face. And if I do? Then maybe someday we'll know whether there is anything left to rebuild. You won't promise? No. Why? Caleb looked at her steadily. Because promises are easy when the other person is watching. Elise lowered her eyes. I understand. Do you? I think I finally do. They sat in silence. Outside, pedestrians crossed the street beneath a gray November sky. Caleb checked his watch. I have to go. Elise nodded. Thank you for meeting me. He stood. Take care of yourself. She looked up at him. He did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. Some part of me probably always will. Her face crumpled. Then why can't we go home? Caleb looked at her with sadness. Because love remembers what trust forgets. He walked away. Elise remained at the table long after he had disappeared through the door. That evening, she returned to the apartment alone. She opened the closet and found one of Caleb's old shirts behind a box. She held it against her chest and cried. But for the first time, the tears were not about getting him back. They were about understanding what she had done while believing he would never leave. She had spent months choosing Daniel when Caleb was not watching. Now Caleb was asking her to discover who she was when nobody was watching at all. By January, the divorce had become a calendar of appointments. Mediation sessions. Financial disclosures. Calls between attorneys. Documents that arrived by email with subject lines so neutral they seemed almost cruel. There were no slammed doors anymore, no midnight accusations, no desperate phone calls. Caleb and Elise had entered the colder stage of separation, where the marriage was no longer an emotional argument but a set of facts that had to be divided. On a gray Tuesday morning, they sat across from each other in a conference room at Claire Bennett's office. A long walnut table separated them. Their attorneys sat nearby, but for most of the morning, neither Caleb nor Elise looked at the other. Claire opened the folder in front of her. "We've made progress on the financial terms," she said. "The remaining issue is whether either of you wants to contest the proposed separation agreement." Elise glanced at Caleb. He looked tired but composed. "I don't want to contest it," she said. Caleb nodded. "Neither do I." Claire studied them. "Then we're close." Elise looked down at her hands. "Can I ask something?" Claire nodded. "Of course. Do we have to talk about the night?" Caleb's attorney looked toward Claire. Claire answered carefully. "Legally, not in detail. Emotionally, that's another question." Elise swallowed. "I think I need to." Caleb finally looked at her. "Why?" "Because I keep telling myself it was one night." He said nothing. "And I know that's not true," she continued. "But I need to say it out loud." Claire closed her folder. "You have time." Elise took a breath. "I told Caleb I was going to a company celebration." "That was true." She paused. "But I knew Daniel would be there. I knew we'd probably leave together." Caleb's expression did not change. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because if I told you, I would have had to admit what I was doing." "And what were you doing?" Elise's voice broke. "Choosing something I knew would hurt you." The room became silent. "I thought I could separate it," she said. "My career. My marriage. Daniel. I thought I could keep everything in different boxes." Caleb looked at her. "You couldn't." "No." She wiped her cheek. "I wanted the excitement without the consequences. That's honest. I didn't understand the consequences." "You understood enough to lie." She closed her eyes. "Yes." Caleb leaned back. "That's what I couldn't forgive." Elise looked at him. "The affair?" "The calculation." Her face tightened. "What calculation?" "You knew I would be waiting." He paused. "You knew I'd worry. You knew I'd call. You knew I'd forgive you if you came home with an explanation that sounded convincing enough." Elise looked down. "Yes. That's what changed everything." She whispered, "I thought you were safe." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Safe? I thought you would always be there. You said that before." "I know." Her voice trembled. "I thought your love meant I could make mistakes and still come home." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "My love meant I believed you would care enough not to make certain mistakes." Elise nodded slowly. "I didn't." "No." She looked toward the window. "Do you remember what you said when you answered the phone that night?" Caleb asked. "You asked where I was. And I lied." "Yes. I could have told you the truth then." "Yes. Would you have forgiven me?" Caleb considered the question. "I don't know. Would you have stayed? But I didn't give you the choice." "No." Elise looked at him. "That's what hurts, isn't it?" Caleb's eyes softened. "That's part of it." "What else?" He exhaled slowly. "The unanswered calls weren't the beginning." Elise nodded. "I know. They were the moment everything became impossible to ignore." "I know." Caleb looked down at the table. There were hundreds of smaller choices. Elise began to cry. "I know. You stopped telling me when your plans changed. You stopped inviting me to things because you said I wouldn't fit into that part of your life. You started keeping your phone face down. You stopped touching me unless you wanted something. You stopped asking about my work. You stopped looking at me when I talked." Elise covered her mouth. "I know. Every one of those things seemed small." He paused. "I forgave every one. And I kept making them." "Yes." She nodded. "Because I thought there would always be another tomorrow." Caleb looked at her. "So did I. That sentence hurt her more than anger would have. "When did you stop loving me?" she asked. Caleb shook his head. "I didn't." "Then when did you stop fighting?" "That night." "Because I didn't answer?" "No." He leaned forward. "Because I finally understood that I was fighting alone." Elise stared at him through tears. "I wish you had told me." "I did." "When?" "Every time I asked you to come home, every time I told you I missed you. Every time I asked if something was wrong." He paused. "You heard me. You just didn't believe I would act." Elise nodded slowly. "You're right." Claire remained silent, allowing the room to hold the confession without interrupting it. After several minutes, Elise said, "I want you to know something." Caleb waited. "I don't blame Daniel anymore." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Because he didn't make my choices." She took a breath. "He didn't promise you anything." "I did." Caleb looked down. "That's the first thing you've said today that sounds completely free of excuses." Elise wiped her tears. "I am sorry." Caleb nodded. "I." He was silent for several seconds. "I'm working on it." She looked relieved and devastated at the same time. "Does that mean there is hope?" "No." Her expression fell. "Then what does it mean?" "It means I don't want to carry hatred into the rest of my life." Elise nodded. "I don't want you to hate me." "I don't." "What do you feel?" Caleb looked at the woman he had loved for 10 years. "Grief." She lowered her eyes. "Me too." The mediator returned to the room with a stack of documents. The practical part of the morning resumed. They discussed the apartment. The savings. The division of furniture. The retirement accounts, ordinary things that suddenly felt sacred because they had once belonged to a shared future. When the final pages were placed in front of them, Elise's hand trembled. Caleb signed first. She watched his pen move across the paper. Then he placed it down. "It's your turn." She looked at him. "I wish I could change what happened." She signed. The pen made a faint scratching sound against the paper. That was all. No music. No dramatic confession. No final kiss. Just 2 signatures ending something that had taken 10 years to build. Outside the office, snow had begun falling. Elise stood beside Caleb on the sidewalk. Neither knew what to say. Finally, she whispered, "I really thought you'd always be there." Caleb looked at the snow settling on the shoulders of her coat. "I was. Until I made you leave." He nodded. "Until you made staying impossible." She looked at him. "Will I ever see you again?" "Probably." "As what?" Caleb looked toward the street. "I don't know." She nodded. "Goodbye, Caleb." He looked at her one last time. "Goodbye, Elise." He walked away. Elise remained beneath the falling snow until he disappeared into the crowd. She finally understood the truth she had spent months avoiding. She had not lost Caleb because she ignored his calls that night. She had lost him through hundreds of smaller choices: the dismissive smile, the delayed reply, the cancelled dinner, the hidden message, the lie, the moment she chose someone else's attention over her husband's trust. The unanswered calls had only been the first time Caleb finally believed what all those smaller choices had been saying. By the time the phone stopped ringing, the marriage had already been asking to be saved for a very long time. 6 months after the divorce, Caleb Mercer stopped checking his phone every time it vibrated. It was such a small change that nobody else noticed. He noticed. For years, the sound of a notification had carried a reflexive urgency. Was Elise home? Had she arrived safely? Did she need him? Had she remembered the dinner they planned? Now, when the screen lit up, Caleb simply looked when he was ready. His life had become quieter without becoming smaller. He had moved into a modest apartment near the lake, traded long corporate evenings for mornings at a neighborhood coffee shop, and started taking long walks along the water before work. On Saturdays, he cooked for friends instead of waiting for someone who might cancel. He bought a second-hand record player because Elise had once told him they did not need one. He planted herbs on the narrow balcony even though he had always believed he was incapable of keeping anything alive. One morning, his friend Marcus noticed the basil growing beside the window. "You're becoming domestic," Marcus said. Caleb smiled. "Apparently. You seem different." Caleb looked toward the lake. "I sleep better." Marcus nodded. "That's not what I meant." Caleb smiled again. No. He had not become bitter. That surprised him. He had expected anger to survive longer than love. Instead, anger had slowly dissolved into something quieter. He still remembered Elise. Sometimes he missed her. Sometimes a song would take him back to their first apartment, their first Christmas, the night they drove through a snowstorm because Elise wanted pancakes at 2 in the morning. But memories no longer felt like invitations. They were simply places he had once lived. Meanwhile, Elise's career recovered. She returned to work with a discipline that bordered on severity. She stopped attending unnecessary parties. She stopped posting every achievement online. She learned to sit in a room without needing everyone to notice her. Within months, she led a successful national campaign and received praise from executives who once questioned whether she could handle the pressure. Her name appeared in business publications. Her photograph appeared on conference screens. People congratulated her. "You look incredible," a colleague told her after a presentation. Elise smiled politely. "Thank you. You must be thrilled." She looked across the ballroom. But the truth was more complicated. Success no longer filled the empty space the way she had expected it to. Daniel was gone from her life completely. He had returned to his own relationship and rarely appeared in her thoughts now. The affair that had once seemed like an escape had become a memory she was almost ashamed to touch. The more successful Elise became, the clearer one uncomfortable truth became: she had never needed another man to become the woman she wanted to be. She had simply used another man's attention to avoid confronting the woman she already was. One evening, after a conference in Chicago, Elise returned to the apartment she now rented alone. She set her purse on the counter and removed her shoes. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Typed again. "I'm learning." She sent that instead. Then she sat on the couch and opened an old folder stored in the back of a drawer. Inside were photographs from her marriage. Their first trip to Seattle. Thanksgiving with Caleb's parents. A photograph of Caleb asleep on the couch with a book on his chest. She smiled at that one. Then she found the photograph from their wedding. Caleb was looking at her instead of the camera. Elise stared at his face. "You really loved me," she whispered. She knew the answer, but saying it aloud made the loss sharper. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Caleb's name appeared. Her heart stopped for a moment. She answered immediately, "Hello." His voice was warm but distant. "Hi." She sat straighter. "Why are you calling?" "Claire sent me the final property paperwork. There's one signature missing." Elise closed her eyes. "Of course. Right. I'll forward it." "Okay." Silence followed. Neither of them seemed willing to end the call. "How are you?" she finally asked. Really? I'm glad. How are you?" Elise looked at the wedding photograph in her hand. "I'm learning." Caleb was quiet. "That's good." She swallowed. "Caleb." "Yes. Do you ever think about us?" He did not answer immediately. "Sometimes." Her heart tightened. "Do you miss me?" "Sometimes." "Then why doesn't it matter?" Caleb's voice was gentle. "Because missing someone isn't the same as needing them back." Elise closed her eyes. There it was. The sentence she had spent months avoiding. "I understand," she whispered. "Do you?" "I think I finally do." Caleb said nothing. "I used to think you would always answer," she continued. "Even when I ignored you. Even when I was angry. Even when I made you wait." "I know. And when you stopped calling." Her voice broke. "I thought you were punishing me." "I wasn't. I know that now." She looked at the photograph. You were just done waiting. Caleb exhaled softly. Yes. Was there ever a moment when you wanted to come back? He thought about it. There were moments when I wanted the old life back. Elise's eyes filled with tears. Isn't that the same thing? No. What's the difference? The old life existed before trust was broken. He paused. I can't go back to a place that doesn't exist anymore. Elise pressed her hand against her mouth. I'm sorry. I know. I really am. I know that too. Do you forgive me? Caleb was silent for several seconds. Yes. A tear slipped down her cheek. Thank you. But Elise. Yes? Forgiveness isn't an invitation. She closed her eyes. I know. Another silence. This one was different. It was not hostile. It was simply final. Good night, Caleb. Good night. She waited for him to hang up. He did. Elise remained seated in the darkness long after the screen went black. She looked at the wedding photograph one last time before placing it back inside the folder. Across the city, Caleb stood on his balcony with a cup of coffee. The lake was dark, the wind moving softly through the trees. His phone was still in his hand. He looked at the screen, then placed it on the table. He did not wonder whether Elise would call again. He did not hope she would. He did not fear it either. That was the freedom he had spent months learning. He had not rebuilt his life to prove that he could live without her. He had rebuilt it because he had finally understood that his life belonged to him. Somewhere behind him, a record played softly. The basil plant on the windowsill needed water. A friend was coming over for dinner the next evening. Work was waiting in the morning. There were ordinary things ahead, and Caleb had learned to value ordinary things. They did not demand promises. They did not require him to wait. They simply asked him to be present. Across town, Elise stood by her own window, watching the lights of Chicago flicker beneath the night sky. She thought about that first call at 11:47, the second at 12:18, the third at 12:56, the fourth at 1:32. She remembered seeing his name on the screen and choosing not to answer. At the time, she had believed she was postponing a conversation. Now she understood that she had been making a choice. And the hardest consequence had never been the divorce papers, the empty apartment, or the loss of the man she once called her husband. It was knowing that the man who had once answered every call no longer needed to hear hers. The last call had ended months ago. Caleb had simply been the first person to understand that sometimes silence is not an invitation to call again. Sometimes it is the answer.